Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Tabi pun. Good morning everyone. All the praises be to Allah, the Lord of the Alamin. Praise I present the presences of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala for all the blessing that has given to me. So today I can present my proposal on linguistics through this video. I also want to say thank you for Miss Febri as my lecturer in the seminar on linguistics subject and all of my beloved friends. Before I start this presentation, let me introduce myself. My name is Marsela. I'm a student of STK IPP Bandar Lampung, majoring in English Department Class 5B. This presentation has 3 chapters. First chapter is Introduction, second chapter is Theoretical of Framework, and the last chapter is Research Method. Alright, without any further ado, let's start this presentation from my research title, that is an analysis of code mixing used by teacher in teaching learning process at SMA Negeri 1 Menggala in 2021 and 2022. We are going to chapter 1, that is Introduction. Background of research problem. Sociolinguistics discuss about language and society. This condition where there are some people who master more than one language is called bilingual or multilingual society. English as a foreign language in Indonesia, therefore, bilingualism will occur between Indonesian and English language. Indonesians usually do conversation with each other. They use more than one language. In many situations, sometimes they speak by mixing language or code. This code is called about code mixing. Code mixing is the using of one language in another language or the changing between language A to language B at the level word to word or phrase to phrase at the same conversation topics. Student and the teacher often use code mixing in teaching and learning process. It's something natural when it's happen in the teaching and learning process because the teacher and the students are Indonesian people while English is a new or foreign language for them. Based on the problem, the researchers want to know more about code mixing in teaching learning process. There are 3 identification of research problem. They are, first, in teaching learning process in the class, the teacher involved bilingual language such as English and Indonesia. Second, in teaching learning process in the class, the teacher used code mixing to communicate with the students. The last is the teacher have some reason used to code mixing in teaching learning process in the class. The limitation of research problem, the researchers will analyze what the type, the dominant type, and the reason of the teacher to use code mixing in teaching learning process. There are 3 formulations of research problem. First, what are the type of code mixing used by English teacher in teaching learning process? Second, what is the dominant type of code mixing used by the English teacher in teaching learning process? And the last is, what are the reason of the teacher to use code mixing in teaching learning process? There are 3 objectives of research problem. They are, first, to find out the time of the code mixing that used by the English teacher in teaching learning process. Second, to find out the dominant type of code mixing that used by the teacher in the teacher in teaching learning process. And the last is to know the reason of the English teacher use code mixing in teaching learning process. There are some benefits of this research, both for study and for reader. For study, this research will be useful to give information about code mixing and the type of code mixing that is used in teaching learning process. Furthermore, this research also will be useful for students to realize the use of code mixing that they do with the teacher in the classroom. For the reader, this research will be useful to give knowledge in general about the code mixing. And then we are going to chapter 2, that is about theoretical of framework. Research finding. There are some researchers that have studied about the code mixing analysis. One of them is Nirwana. In 2015, in her thesis, the title is Code Mixing Used by Student and Teacher Interaction at the 4th semester of English and Literature Department of Adab and Humanities Faculty of UIN Makassar. She found that there are 101 data of code mixing interaction in classroom interaction, and the researchers also found 3 types of code mixing, such as intrasential code mixing, intralexical code mixing, and involving change of pronunciation. The type of code mixing were 73 data of intrasential code mixing, 20 data of intralexical code mixing, and 8 data of involving change of pronunciation. There are some theories about social linguistics, bilingualism, multilingualism, code mixing, types of code mixing, and code mixing in teaching learning process. The first is social linguistics. Social linguistics is the study of the relationship between language and society. There is one field in language study at the focus on discuss the language related to study the variety, function, and the user of language. So, what is the differences between bilingualism and multilingualism? The bilingualism is a person who can speak or use 2 or more languages, while bilingualism is the use of at least 2 languages either by an individual or by a group or speaker, such as the inhabitant of a particular region or a nation. While multilingualism is the ability of using more than 2 languages in communication. In addition, multilingualism is when someone using 2 or more languages in the sentence. Code mixing is a phenomenon exists in a bilingualism or multilingual community where the speaker when do a communication process by using language, especially oral communication, they mix their language, word to word or phrase to phrase from one language to another language at the same conversation topics. There are 3 types of code mixing. They are first, intra-essential code mixing, second, intralexical code mixing, and the last is involved change of pronunciation. Code mixing in teaching learning process. English teachers often use code mixing in the class. They commonly use English in teaching, but they also commonly use another language such as Indonesia to make the explanation clearer and another reason based on their need. It is natural in teaching learning process in the classroom. It means 50% teacher use code mixing in teaching learning process. We are going to chapter 3. That is about research methods in this research. Research design. The researcher will use descriptive method. It means that the researcher will describe, analyze, and interpret the use of code mixing in the teaching and learning process. The research will collect the data by selecting word or phrase and closely repeating code mixing used by the teacher in the classroom. The subject of this research are English teacher at SMA Negeri 1 Menggala. Then, research setting has 2 settings. There is research place and research time. The research place, the researcher will conduct at SMA Negeri 1 Menggala in academic year of 2021 and 2022. And then the research time, the research will conduct the teacher of the first semester of 10th grade of SMA Negeri 1 Menggala in academic year of 2021 and 2022. Research object. The object of this research is the use of code mixing used by teacher in teaching learning process in the classroom. The data of this research will be in the written form which is taken by the researcher using tape recorder. There are 3 data collecting techniques. The first one is observation, interview, and document. The researchers will conduct an observation before taking the data. The researcher will go to the SMA Negeri 1 Menggala and observe the language used by the teacher in teaching learning process. There is a collecting data technique by observation. The second is interview. The researchers will ask the English teacher in the school. During the interview, the researchers record the dialogue. Interview is needed to get clarification. And the last is document. The researchers observe the verbal action. The data of this research are the code mixing that will be spoken by the teacher and student in the classroom. To get the data, the researcher will collect the data with this following step. First, the researcher will observe in the classroom use voice recorder to record the teacher utterance in the learning process. Second, it will be identified the teacher use code mixing in SMA Negeri 1 Menggala, especially to identify the type and the dominant type of code mixing that use. The third, the researchers collect the data observation in the classroom from teacher that occurs in teaching learning process. And the fourth, after observation is done, the researchers will interview the English teacher in SMA Negeri 1 Menggala to know the reason of the using of code mixing. And the last is, the researchers analyze the data of observation and interview. There is trustworthiness. Trustworthiness is important part in research. There are 4 characteristics of trustworthiness. They are credibility, transferability, defendability, and confirmability. In this research, will be focused on credibility and dependability. Alright, that's all from me. I think that is enough. Thanks for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.